So I've always been a big Xbox guy, especially since the 360 era. Something about a lot of Microsoft's lineup, like Gears of War especially, Halo, those were like my big games. So for me, it was always natural that even moving from the 360 to the Xbox One to the One S, all the way up to the Series X, that I'd be getting those consoles purely for those types of games. And I understand those aren't for everyone, but for me, and especially at my point in life where it's a lot harder to focus on full massive games at this point, the Microsoft consoles are the ones that appeal to me. Now, years ago, my son, who I also got into gaming, I got him an Xbox Series S. And I've had the pleasure of being able to also test that one alongside my Series X for a number of years now. And I wanted to go over in this video about kind of where the Xbox Series S stands and if it's worth getting in 2023. And there's a couple really fantastic features about it that I want to go over, as well as some stuff that some people might find an issue if it comes to even considering getting that console. So let's take a look. To start off, I want to point out that the Series S is really small, which I think makes it look really unique. It also has a really cool aesthetic to it. It looks a lot like the One S of the previous Xbox generation, but of course we're missing the disc drive, as well as we have a very large fan grille on the side, but I think aesthetically it looks really, really cool. And in comparison to the Series X, I actually think it looks better aesthetically. The Series X looks just kind of massive and almost obnoxiously big. But overall, I really like the look of this. I personally like the all white versus the all black configuration that you got on the Series X. So as far as aesthetics, I think this thing looks great. I also want to point out that this version of the Xbox Series line, so the Series S, tends to go on sale quite a bit. So I know around Christmas time in Canada, I was seeing prices as low as $2.99, with places like Superstore even giving $75 cash back if you purchased a Series S, making the console pretty much $225 or something like that. So I see that as far as price point goes as well, this is a really, really, really good price device for what you get. Now, it also depends what you're planning to get with the console. What I mean is, yes, it's cheap, but in my opinion, this console feels, how do I say it, almost a little one-sided if you're not getting something like Game Pass. So Game Pass, I believe I spend like $16 a month with gold on between both consoles. So if you're going to get Game Pass for this, I think that's almost a must-have with this digital-only version of the Xbox Series line, because you have such a fantastic library of games, and it appears that over the time that my son and I have been using it, we're seeing better and better games continuously coming out. Now, in my house, this Xbox is my secondary Xbox. Well, it's my son's main Xbox. When I say secondary, what I mean is my bulk of my gaming that I typically do is on the Series X. And for my son, he's just more happy to be able to play things like Fortnite and other games with me. But one of the things that I really like about this console, and I like about the way Microsoft has set everything up, is that we're able to do family sharing. So I share both my Game Pass with his console, so I only pay for one subscription every single month. And he's also able to access all the library of digital games that I have on my Series X, or have purchased on my Series X or previous Xboxes through that account, and play them on his as well. So, for example, I was able to buy the newest Call of Duty on my Series X, and he was able to play on his Series S free of charge. Just download it, he's good to go. So, between that and Game Pass, this makes to me the Series S very, very desirable. And what I mean by that is you have such a large library of games you can play from, and if you're in my situation where you're buying the Series S as a secondary console and you got it for a good price, definitely take advantage of things like the family sharing, because it makes the value of this to me a lot better, because I'm not having to buy the game multiple times between different consoles. So I really appreciate that Microsoft has made that a function of this console. The other thing, and this is kind of the bigger discussion that I see going on between the Xbox groups and the different people on them who are using Series S or Series X, and it's really actually the visuals. So, of course, one thing we have to bring up is the fact that the Series S is considered more underpowered than the Series X, so it's a step down hardware-wise. However, it's guaranteed to play both games between both platforms. So if you have a game that comes out for Series X, it's going to also come out on the Series S, although in some cases it's going to be pared down. But here's the thing. I've played with my son many of the big major Xbox games between both of them. Him and I recently have been playing the newest Call of Duty, and I was watching it on his Xbox, and truthfully, I couldn't tell the difference. So what I mean is, visually, there might have been some differences if I looked hard enough, but I thought it looked fantastic on the Series S. And the same goes for even games like Halo Infinite and Gears 5. I've tried them between both platforms, and I think that visually, this thing looks fantastic. And again, I want to harken back because the price, especially if you're going for the Series S, is probably going to be a reason why you might even be considering it over the Series X. And for the price of what you get so far, I think there's tremendous value here because the visuals look fantastic for such a tiny little console. And again, we have to throw that asterisk out there that this Xbox wasn't designed to have the full 4K features that the Series X was supposed to have, but ultimately, for what my son uses it for, what we use it for as a family, I don't think it needs to. And what I mean is we're not playing it on 4K screens like I am my Series X. We're using it on, for in his case, a pretty cheap little TV. And I think as far as what he gets out of it, visually this thing looks phenomenal. And I have tried it on my 4K display, and of course, yes, you lose out on some of the resolution features, but even then I still had a hard time beyond the resolution being able to tell the difference visually between the bigger brother Series X and the Series S. So overall, I'm actually thoroughly impressed with the visuals because I thought, after seeing the price difference and Microsoft, of course, showing the difference in power between the two consoles, that we'd be seeing some massively pared down differences in the actual games, but I so far haven't really spotted much beyond resolution. So as it stands, I think this is a very, very capable little console for what it offers. And another thing, and this might be a curiosity for some of you who are looking at this point in time, is the settings. So for the most part, what I was able to tell is that the settings that you have on this are identical. There was nothing really different between the two consoles that I could tell. Of course, this can still output 4K. However, that's limited by what developers choose to allow their games to do. So if a game's not designed to use 4K through the Series S, it's just not going to have it. It's going to run, I assume, just upscaled to 4K if you're on a 4K display from 1080p. But overall, the settings pretty much all the same between both consoles. And truthfully, if you had like a blind setup where you couldn't see which one was which, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the operating systems or any of that stuff there. Now, while I am singing the praise of this console, there are some pretty, I would say, significant issues with the Series S, especially going into 2023. And I want to give you kind of my reasoning why. So the storage on the console only comes in a 512 gigabyte configuration, which isn't a lot in the first place, but when you account for everything else that the operating system of the console needs to use, you really actually only get less than 400 gigabytes of accessible storage to use. That, in my opinion, makes this very limited, especially going into 2023 when we're seeing games like Call of Duty have 100 gigabyte updates, and some games now are needing up to 150 gigabytes worth of space just to play them on the console. It really, really limits the full functionality of this console, and in many cases you're almost in a position where you got to consider some sort of expansion. So the problem is, though, is I like the way the expansion's set up on these consoles. It's really like it almost feels like you're fully upgrading the console because you use a tiny card the size of like a GameCube memory card, plug it in the back, and you expand the storage. But that's not the issue. The issue is that little GameCube size card thing is very expensive, and I put a review on this, but the pricing to upgrade the storage between even the Series X as well, but at least the Series X you get 1 terabyte of space, but even between them, to upgrade the storage on these consoles is very expensive, and Seagate seems to be the only ones who are allowed to make this. I am seeing that some people are saying there's going to be third-party options, or there are some almost like bootleg third-party options popping up on Amazon. I can't speak to those. I just know that the Seagate expansion cards are quite pricey, and that is really something you should consider if you're going to be getting the Series S over the Series X in 2023, because again, games are going to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and 512 just does not seem like enough space. The other thing, and this is more of something I wish would be an option down the road, and personally, I'm not necessarily going to say this is a deal breaker for most people, but if you're like me and you've held on to a lot of your Xbox games, your Xbox 360 games, older Xbox One games, there's no disk drive option, and it would be cool if you could use a third-party plug-and-play disk drive to be able to take advantage of some of your older games on the Series S. So for those of you who might be leaving, the Xbox One era and going into this era, that's definitely a consideration to make, because if you don't have those games digitally, you may be in a position where now you're going to have to hold on to your old Xbox if you want to still be able to play some of the more classic games on those devices. And lastly, again, I want to reiterate, so I am impressed with the visuals that you get on the Series S overall. But it would be cool if more developers allowed more scalability options, and this is less of an issue with the console itself and more of an issue with the way developers are approaching it. It would be cool if they allowed more scalability on some of the visuals, including 4K. Now, I know that might seem a little nitpicky because this wasn't really designed for that, but, games like Fortnite run in full 4K and look fantastic. It would be nice if that was just even an option for some games. Now, it's not a major thing, but just something worth considering, or even if Microsoft allowed, experimental options like a PC to allow you to change those things at your own discretion. I think that would be interesting moving into 2023 if this is going to be a main console for some people. Because again, in my position, we're kind of using this as my secondary console for my son to play on. But if it was my main console, it would be nice to have a bit more scalability if I'm using like a high-end gaming monitor or something and I wanted to prioritize resolution over, textures, for example. But overall, I want to overemphasize that I think this console is very good value for what you're getting, especially going into 2023. And it's made even better by being able to have access to things like Game Pass, or even the family sharing options if this is a secondary or additional Xbox to your home. I think those two features alone give this tremendous bang for your buck, because at $16 a month on top of the console's cost, you get a massive library of games, and if you have an existing library of games, it makes it just that much better. And again, the visuals for what you get for the cost of this console are still impressing me again. Like watching my son play Call of Duty on his little screen that he has in his setup there, and pretty much not being able to tell the difference visually between his big brother, to me, it's fantastic. And I think that there's a lot of capability to this console that developers probably still haven't really even optimized for. So I think in 2023, I know it's been a concern for some big fans of these consoles, what's going to happen to the Series S, but it looks like the support's not slowing down, and it looks like developers are getting better and better at optimizing for this console. So overall, other than some of the little things that I was talking about, like storage, it would be nice to down the road see, a 1 terabyte version. Did you pay $50 more for it or something? But overall, I would say, granted you know what you're getting into, especially with the expansion portion, I think this is a fantastic either starter console or main console, depending on your setup. Granted, you're not expecting 4K for every single game. So overall, I think in 2023, you're definitely in a good position to be picking up a console like this. And it looks like it's just going to be getting better and better with things like Game Pass and some of the releases this year.